But so the Rebbe here is talking about, one second, the third day of Tammuz. What's the third day of Tammuz? Let me just see. The third day of Tammuz is the day that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, was released from prison and sent to exile. Released from prison and sent to exile. And about a week, something like that, a week and a half later, as he was released from exile, and he could return back home in Russia. And then something like about a year later, something a little bit less, he left Russia. He had to leave. They forced him out of Russia. They had to leave Russia. So it happened like in stages. First of all, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was taken to prison. This is by Stalin. Again, Stalin killed tens of millions of people. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was on the top of the wanted list. And he was taken in and was supposed to be killed that very night that he was taken in. And there was some sort of a mix-up, and he was not killed. And then afterwards they said, okay, well, we'll send him to exile for 10 years and then for 3 years. And then they sent him, finally, they released him from prison and sent him to exile. And the Hasidim didn't even know if the Rebbe was alive. And they didn't know what was going to happen from this exile business. Also, they could always change their minds. And miraculously, he got out. He got out of the exile. So he was taken into prison on the 15th day of Sivan. And a little bit less than a month later, on the 13th day of Tammuz, the next month, as he was released totally. And then after that, he left Russia. He came briefly to America for almost a year, went there to America, and then he went back to Poland, and he settled in Poland until the war broke out, until 1940 broke out. So the whole thing happened in stages. Says the Rebbe, something else happened also in stages on the same date. What was it? About 3,000 years earlier, there was the story of Joshua bringing the Jewish people into the land of Israel and beginning to fight to conquer the land of Israel. Conquer the land of Israel. And one of the first battles was against Jericho and Jericho. And he fought against the people of Jericho in order to get to Jericho. Anyway, one of the battles there, and he was winning the battle, but the sun started to set. And in those days, they didn't fight in the nighttime. So God made a miracle, and the sun stopped. In fact, all the stars stopped. We'll talk about that. All the constellations, the whole entire zodiac and everything had stopped for one day. And then he continued fighting, and he won. So the Rebbe said both of these miracles have one common factor, and that is that they were revealed in stages. It wasn't at one time, right? That the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe just suddenly, one day, they just, put him on a plane and just sent him out of Russia, just got him out of Russia. No. First of all, they let him out of prison. And he was sent to exile. Then they let him out of exile, but he was still in Russia. Then afterwards, he got out of Russia, right? And then afterwards, he was in the war started. Then he went to America. That's where he settled. So it was in stages. The same thing is with Joshua. What happened to Joshua? God didn't just destroy the enemies of Joshua. Joshua was fighting Yoshua. And then suddenly the sun stood still so that he could continue fighting. So why did God do it that way? I mean, if God can make the whole sun stand still, and the sun is pretty powerful, so he can make the sun stand still, or if you want to go according to the explanation of science, made the world stop spinning around, right? But that's not what it was meant. By the way, this whole idea of the sun standing still, that's why we get the idea in Judaism that the sun goes around the earth. The sun moves, and the earth is not moving. It really doesn't make any difference because Jews made calculations, but when the month, very exact calculations, way before, what was his name? Copernicus came along, whatever, according to and said that the earth goes around, the sun goes around, I'm sorry, the earth goes around the sun. Copernicus, before that, it was what, Ptolemy or somebody, he said it was the other one. However, it was the Jews for thousands of years made the calculations and the computations in the stars, and they were exactly right all the time, saying that the sun goes around the earth, even though it's more complicated. But nevertheless, that's what they did. So that's where they came from. However it is, God stopped it. Whatever goes around, whatever, it's not really important. God stopped the whole process. He stopped the whole process for one full day. So if you could stop the whole process, the stars, so he could dissipate the enemy. Just make all the enemies have toothaches or something and go home. Just stop fighting. But that's a big problem for God. He says, no, God didn't do that. He made the sun stop, step number one. And then Joshua continued fighting, step number two. So it came in steps. Okay, why? Here we go. Okay, that's the question. Why? Cave and since. Are we recording? Yes. We're recording. Yeah. So we have to, Nidrash says, we have to explain why did the miracle unfold slowly in stages? Why? Says the Rebbe. Cave, we did this yesterday. Cave and since Shakora Kane, since there's a miracle, and it was such a big miracle that what? That the sun stopped. That this is possibly me'anisim agadolim biyoter shakoro ipam. We can put this in the category of, a candidate for the biggest miracle that ever happened in the history of the world. That God made the whole heaven stop. Ad she'apasuk omer, it says, "V'lo haya kayom hahu lefanav v'acharav." There was not a miracle like this before it or after it. Why? In order Yehoshua b'nei Yisrael, that Joshua and the Jewish people would be able to continue fighting al yadei by means of seeing the enemy and running after them. Because at that time, Amar Shemesh, the sun stood still, Nochach Givon, and opposite the city of Givon, v'chashash, and they were worrying, Pan Yishka, maybe it'll set, the sun will go down, ba'onato in the normal time, v'lo yachlu lirodov, and they won't be able to pursue the enemy, be'ishon alayla, in dusk and nightfall. For therefore it says, therefore God told the sun, shalo yelech me'alcho, that it should stop in its path. V'yamtin, and that the sun should delay. Oh, the nochach Givon, it should delay opposite the city of Givon. Makom shehu omed, where it is, so that it should shine where they were in the place of Givon. So the miracle could have been liot nes mishlemot. Why did God have to make the sun stop, and then after that more was required for the victory? Why? Instead of just stopping the sun, in order that Joshua should be able to fight in a normal way to the daytime, God should have done it like this. That Joshua could have asked God. He said, God, please make the sun stand still. No, he could have said, God, God, destroy the enemy. Then you won't have to need the sun to stop. Or also make another one. Say, God, make it that we can see. In the nighttime. What's wrong with that? It says there already was this before. When the Jews left Egypt, the ninth plague of leaving, there were 10 plagues, right? In Egypt, the ninth plague was that it was total darkness, deep darkness descended on the Egyptian people, on all the populace. Deep darkness. I don't know if you've ever been in a place where there's total darkness. It's really bizarre to be in a place that's totally black. You can't see anything. It's very strange. It takes a long time to get used to it. Well, that's the way it was. But it says, but all the Jews, it says the Jewish people, they were able to see. There was darkness by the Egyptians, and the Jewish people could see. Why not do the same thing here? Like it says in the sentence we've read, from heaven. it says that God threw big stones on the enemy. So God is able to do these things. He can make people see in the nighttime. And that's a much easier miracle to do than to make all of this constellation stop. That's massive. And so why did God do the miracle in stages? Why didn't he just finish the thing off? What did he? Gam, also the whole miracle of the sun stood still. Yesh yachor, there is an argument. There is an argument. How exactly was it? Was it that the sun just kept shining? Or a yom? Maybe we can say, let's say that the sun set, but it was still light outside. Huh? Then it could be that only Galgal Hashemesh, only the sun itself should stop and continue to shine. Now, why not make a miracle like this, right? That the world, all the stars in the sky kept going, but the sun just kept shining, and it shined in the nighttime. And let's say it shined for one full day, and then the next day it just resumed where it was. So you didn't have to really change anything, just the sun. The sun would stop where it is. That would be good enough. Why did it have? It says that Hashem stopped all of the heavens, the sun, the moon, everything. The orbit of the sun and all the stars and all of this. Malach Gilgal Yomi and the Ubemele Mahalech Kala Gilgalim. Why did God have to make it that everything stopped? Hamaki v'soviv v'takol. I'm sorry, I read this too fast. I skipped the line over here. Or Hainu Shanesh Atzar Gamet Inim Kashurim in Malach Hashemesh. It could have been that only the sun stopped, or things that were relevant just to the sun. Right? The orbit of the sun, maybe the orbit of the other planets that are relevant to the sun, whatever. But why do you have to have the whole entire sky, everything in the heavens stop? Why? So it says like this. The difference between them is like this. Ha'im zeu nes shemeshader shover et teva. Was it a miracle that stopped all of nature by means of just stopping only the sun and the moon, it says? Or maybe it was a miracle that changed the nature of the sun. And therefore, all of the Seder Mahalach TV, Shel Hashemesh, Akashur Mahalach. Okay, in other words, what was the miracle that God made with the sun? Let's just take this one example. Did God just make that the sun stopped, or did God change for a few hours the whole laws of nature? Did he change all of the laws of nature? So which one was it? Did the sun just stop, right? And he changed the nature of just the sun or the moon? Or did he change all of nature? We can say that this is also the two types of miracles. There's a miracle that does not change the thing. Like, for instance, the miracle of blood. The water turned into blood when the water, the first of the 10 plagues. So when the first of the 10 plagues, the water changed into blood. But the fact is, it didn't remain blood. Because when the miracle stopped, then everything reverted back to water. Right? Therefore, the blood returned back to water. So nature itself didn't change. Or in our case, when the sun stopped. So this was just a miracle by the sun. And then afterwards, the sun went back to its normal path. Mahalach Hashemesh betor halach shar gilulim. Then just the sun stopped, relevant to, because that's all that Joshua needed. Or maybe not. Maybe the miracle with Joshua was, it was a miracle that changed the whole nature of the sun. It wasn't just a temporary thing. Like the miracle, it says that Moses' hand turned into tzorat. It says that God said one of the things you should show the Jewish people, take your hand and put it into your this and take it out into your whatever is under your shirt, and take it out, and your hand became all diseased. It says after the miracle, his hand remained diseased, and in order to get that, you had to have another miracle to make it come back. Oh, so it's the same thing also with the previous Rebbe. We'll see how. Was it just a miracle relevant to the Rebbe, or did God actually change the nature of the world? Here's another example. The staff of Aaron. Staff of Aaron. Now, in this week's Torah portion, we have another example of change of nature. Change of nature. Right? Up to now, we've talked about two types of change of nature. One is that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe miraculously got out of the clutches of the communists, right? Their nature was just to kill people, no problem. And miraculously, he got out. What exact type of miracle was that? Was that a miracle that nature itself changed, or just temporary, just a temporary thing changed? Right? The same thing with the sun stopping for Joshua. Was it just an individual thing, a fluke, that the sun just stopped, or did nature itself stop? There was somehow where there was a change in nature. It stopped for Joshua. Okay, now we have a third example. Here's a third example of a similar miracle. It says that in this week's Torah portion that Korach disagreed with Moses and Aaron. And so Moses said to Korach, okay, all of the tribes of Israel, you had big doubts about me and Aaron. Okay, everybody get staffs. Take a staff, a stick, a staff, and we'll take these staffs and we'll put them into the holy, the Holy of Holies, not the Holy of Holies, but the holy right outside. And we'll leave it there in the night. We'll come back in the morning. Whoever's staff grows fruits, as that's the one that is chosen by God. Everyone write your name on your staff. Write your name on your staff. They wrote the name on the staff, they put it in, and it says, the staff of Aaron grew. The staff of Aaron grew. Okay, so the staff of Aaron, what did it grow? It grew branches, and the branches had buds, and the buds grew into almonds. So it was clear from this that God chose Aaron, right? Instead of almonds taking whatever it is, 13 days or something to grow, as it took just a few hours, and it grew totally. But it just didn't have a few buds on it. It was the whole process was there. It grew totally. Okay, so here's another miracle, right? And it's similar. It's similar, right? By the first Rebbe of Chabad, somehow or other, the nature of the communists changed. Did it really change deeply or not? Maybe it was just, a fluke. Same thing by Joshua. The sun stood still. Does that mean the whole nature stood still, or just one little thing, the sun, temporarily? The same thing with Aaron and his staff. The staff grew up almonds. Was that a one-time thing, or was it a change in nature? Oh, let's see. When they disagreed with Aaron about who was a Kohen, the Korach and his group, they argued against Moshe, but they also argued against Aaron, right? That's what we just finished learning. Korach said, I want to be the high priest. I want a priest. So, and everybody agreed with him. So it said, God said to Moshe, take a staff from each one of the heads of the tribes, 12 staffs, each person write his name on the staff, and Aaron write also on the staff of Levi. Aaron. And the person, God said, the person that I choose, his staff will grow. That's what it says. Read in this week's Torah portion. So it was, Moshe put all of the staffs in front of God in the Ohel Moed, right, in the external part of the outside of the Holy of Holies. Ulamachrat, the next day, Moshe came to the tent of meeting, to the holy temple. The staff of Aaron grew, and he knew that Levi was the chosen one. But it says like this: the Yotze Perach, there were flowers, the Yotze Tzitz, and there came like whatever's buds, the Yigmol Shkedim, and there were almonds. O Moshe Hotzi et Kolamatot, Moses took out all these staffs and he put them in front of everyone, that all the Jewish people could see the miracle. And God said, Hashevet Mate Aaron, put the staff of Aaron in front of everyone, and this should be a permanent sign. What? A zikron shebacharti, namely, that everyone should know that I chose Aaron. Says the Rebbe, one second, this whole story has one little point in it that sort of doesn't make any sense. What the whole thing is really great, the staffs proved that Aaron was the one, but what was the proof? What was the proof? Since there was the staff of Aaron grew, so the miracle was enough. You could see that God, Bechirat Kodesh Baruch Hu b'Kohen Aaron, all the other staffs were smooth, and the staff of Aaron had something growing from it. It would have been enough if it nase shkedi muchanim alamateh. You could just see that there were almonds growing there. That would have been the sign for the Jewish people. Namely, it could have been that the miracle was just one little detail that would show that Aaron was the one, the fruits. Why did it have to be that he took the staves out and that first of all there were like flowers or buds, and then afterwards from that grew shkedim. They saw the whole process. Why? Why did it have to grow in a natural way? That there were like flowers, and there were seeds, and there were like these little buds, and from the buds came out the almonds. Right? That's what Moses showed the Jewish people. So let's say they didn't see the process going on, but they looked at the staff and they saw that there were some flowers, and then other places there were the flowers had become like buds, and then afterwards he saw there was other places where the buds became almonds. So they saw the whole process. Why? Why did you have to have that? It should have just been the finished product. And even more, Moses said, take this staff as it is with all the stages of growth, and it should remain the staff of Aaron and the shkedim. It should have been just the finished product. No, it was also a prachim. Like it says, Mishagonas Aaron, it says that when the ark was hidden away in the time of Melech, what was it, Yeshayahu, there was like 50 years something before the destruction of the first temple, so they hid it away. There was also hidden away the staff of Aaron with the almonds and the flowers. Why do you have to have the flowers there? Just the almonds was good enough. Says the Rebbe, that's the whole point. The whole point of this miracle was that also the mateh, the staff itself, a dead stick on its own, it's not relevant that it should have flowers on it and it should grow fruits. This is only in the power of God. But, nevertheless, how did God do the miracle? He did the miracle in a natural way. The miracle was done in the staff of Aaron. It wasn't just a miracle which is totally above nature, but it was a miracle that was in nature. Things that were seemingly unnecessary became part of the miracle. It would have been enough just to have the staff, and the staff grew almonds, right? Just have a staff. It showed there was almonds growing on there. Would you have to have a staff? And there's one place there were flowers, and one place there was flowers that already had buds, and one place there was flowers that buds, and also almonds. This is the nature of the staff. So God wanted the staff to reveal its potential, its nature. Lochem, therefore, it was a way, shapricha v'seder tivi. Therefore, God made the staff of Aaron a miracle, but the miracle was in all of the stages of natural growth. Of a low bahag balat azman, the miracle was that it happened fast. Smichas piros, that it grew up quickly. But the process of growth was natural. First of all, there were flowers, and from the flowers there came buds, and then from the buds there came the fruits. Shkedim. Raya, this was also shown, demonstrated, brought, advertised to the Jewish people. That God chose Aaron to be the Kohen, it wasn't necessarily just pure miracles. It was that the Kohana embraced every aspect of Aaron's being, every aspect of nature, his natural qualities. And these natural qualities became elevated by Aaron for all time. So it's not just that Aaron was a Kohen because God chose him, and that basically any smart person or holy person or sincere person can be a Kohen. It's not so. The Kohanim have a different personality. They have a different nature. The Kohanim have a different, a composition than everybody else. They're different people. They're different people. Their whole nature was changed. Similarly, there's also the miracle of the sun standing still, and also the miracle of the third day of Tammuz, that it changed nature itself, changed, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. So in other words, the release of the previous Rebbe from prison was not just a thing of Chabad or the previous Rebbe, or just the previous Rebbe himself, when he got freed, or the movement of Chabad experienced this big miracle with its leader. It's a thing that affected all of the nature of the whole world was changed at that moment. And that's what we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.